race. Will they catch him? Touchdown, Tigers!
The Jacksonville Jaguars select
Lawrence, back left corner of the end zone for Amari Rodgers, and they do it again. Another Clemson touchdown.
Welcome into the TrevorCast, brought to you by our friends at Claude Nolan Cadillac, building lasting relationships since 1905. I'm Matt Hayes, he's Hayes Carline, and for the next 10 weeks, we'll take you through the life and times of the presumptive even, #1 overall pick of the 2021 NFL Draft, Trevor Lawrence. And of course, if he's not the #1 overall pick by your Jacksonville Jaguars, there may not be enough Tylenol on the planet to peel Carline off the ceiling. So this franchise has waited nearly 3 decades, Hayes, to be in the position of picking a potential generational quarterback in the draft and developing him with the intention of winning big. So over the next 10 weeks and until the night of the 2021 draft, we'll talk to men who have coached with and against Lawrence, as well as some key names from both college football and the NFL. We'll also take a look at Lawrence away from the field, what makes him tick, what drives him, and how that will impact the Jaguars' locker room. So here we are, Hayes, and I just want to begin by affirming that, yes, I'll have that Tylenol in case the unthinkable happens on April 29.
Well, it's going to require Tylenol. It's going to require every drug known to man if Trevor Lawrence is not the selection on April 29th. And first off, I want to say I'm real excited to do this project with you, Matt. I'm super pumped about it. I can't believe that here we are and we're in this situation. It's all been worth it. The 1-15, watching Taven Bryan try and play defensive tackle, it's all been worth it if Trevor Lawrence is the player that we think he is. And God bless Frank Gore and God bless the New York Jets that they were dumb enough to win 2 games at the end of a meaningless year to fork over what might be the best quarterback prospect that we've seen since John Elway. In Trevor Lawrence, and to have him in Jacksonville, to have this problem perhaps solved for the next 20 years, it is super, super exciting. And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to dive deep into Trevor and find out a bunch of stuff about him that we don't know. And it's going to be a fun journey. So I'm looking forward to doing it with you. And let's go. Trevor Lawrence is deserving of this. He would be the last one to tell you that. Right. He's such a humble kid, right. But yeah, something this glorious deserves its moment like this, and I'm glad we're doing it. Certainly appreciative to the bosses at 1010XL for giving us this assignment,
and to Claude Nolan Cadillac,
bringing this
podcast to Jacksonville. You know, it's funny, when I returned to Jacksonville in January of 2019, I remember thinking, we were on the show and I was kind of making a joke, why don't you just tank for 2 seasons and get Lawrence? That was after he just finished his freshman season when he beat a loaded Alabama team in the national championship game, when I had a scout tell me after the game that the 2 best players on the field that day, and there were a lot of NFL players in that field, Christian Wilkins, Watkins, a lot of those guys, a lot of elite players. He told me Trevor Lawrence and Justin Ross, both true freshmen, were the best players in that field in that game. So, I mean, it's been a long time coming right now, and I think there are still a lot of people in the city, and you've been here, all your life, who probably still don't believe this is going to happen. That the reality is you have your generational / franchise quarterback, and all you got to do is run that paper up to the podium.
That's the beauty of this. They don't have to give up anything. They not only do they have this massive amount of draft capital from the end of the Dave Caldwell era, but they don't have to spend any of it to get him. And you can now build your offseason around knowing you're going to have Trevor Lawrence as your starting week 1 quarterback. That is a domino that no other domino has to fall for that to happen. That's the first domino of your offseason, is knowing that you've got Trevor Lawrence as your week 1 starter. Now you can allocate the rest of those draft picks, 6 other picks in the first 4 rounds of this draft, 10 other picks overall, $79 million in cap space going into free agency to build around him. I mean, it is such an enviable position to be in. It's why Urban Meyer's here. It's why he's coaching the Jaguars, because of having the opportunity to coach Trevor Lawrence. And it is really exciting. And again, it's just stunning that the New York Jets won those two games. I mean, again, it will always be where it won't be like, where were you when the Jaguars lost to the Ravens by 30 that day? It'll be, where were you 3 hours later when the Jets somehow upset a Rams team that was really good.
Right.
But yeah, it's just it's remarkable that all they've got to do, to your point, is write Trevor Lawrence down on a card, turn it in, and with the way that longevity is in this league now, this is a 21-year-old kid. He might be your quarterback for 22, 23 years.
Wow. Think about that concept. All right, so we decided to kick this off with a coach who knows a thing or two about number one overall picks, about guys that are faces of the franchise. David Cutcliffe, the coach at Duke. He coached Peyton Manning at Tennessee when he was offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach with Peyton. He coached Eli as the head coach at Ole Miss. Even when they left college, he was a huge mentor for them, still is to this day. One of the best gentlemen in all of sports. We had a really fascinating 17, 18-minute interview. We caught up with him recently, and I think Cut's going to give some very interesting insights into what it's going to be like for Trevor Lawrence here in Jacksonville. So happy to welcome in my friend, Duke coach David Cutcliffe, one of the best teachers of football, pro or college, and a truly wonderful gentleman. David, thanks so much for joining us.
Matt, I'm looking forward to the visit. It'll be fun.
Okay, so David, let's get right into it. You coached and developed and mentored Peyton and Eli Manning, who were both taken number 1 overall in the NFL draft, and most recently, Daniel Jones, who was taken number 6 overall. We talk about pressure all the time with elite athletes, but this kind of pressure, the number 1 overall pick and the fate of a professional franchise on your shoulders, is a brand new world for these guys. How do you prepare a quarterback mentally for that reality?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that people confuse sometimes is where confidence comes from or what it is. And confidence, I've asked had quarterbacks ask me, well, how do I get everybody confident in me? How do I gain everyone's confidence? And I said, nobody gives you confidence. It's earned. And understand that there is an element, no matter where you picked, of a hero to zero mentality. So as you come in, you want to gain confidence of those around you is to only earn their confidence by being confident, which means prepared. And so what I would tell them, and I told every one of them, this is now what you do for a living. You're not doing a work of a student. The only student you are is a student of the game. And so we had, things about padding defenses, just had a set way to go about going into their work. So I hope any quarterback that goes into that league, there's someone helping him transition, not just the folks. And the sad part, people forget, is to some level and degree, because of the NFLPA, these guys are legislated away from their coaches.
Right.
It's very unique in that regard. So having a personal plan is extremely important.
No question about it. David, you went up against Trevor his freshman year, and then obviously you've studied him in the last couple through, studying opponents that weren't necessarily Clemson, but had played Clemson. What are your impressions of Trevor? What were your impressions when you saw him as a freshman, and what are your impressions of him 2 years removed from that experience?
Yeah, just when I was on the field with him in warm-ups, you're always assessing, when you go out there. And he was, first of all, I think people will be surprised just how big he is. And what I mean by big is not tall. People forget sometimes, that there's size is a lot of many different things. He's proportionate. He's got a great lower body, which has served him very well running, but it also serves you in throwing the football. I was really impressed in that regard. Once we started playing, he was a lot faster than I expected him to be. I mean, he's really, he can run. I mean, he's really fast, not just fast, really fast. And then I thought that his anticipation throwing the ball as a freshman was really, really good. And we thought that about him in high school. We looked at him, of course, like everybody in the world did, but he committed pretty early. And, but I thought his anticipation, when you're throwing I'll give people an example. If you're throwing an out-breaking route, That's why I like having a stripe on the helmets that I coach, is that ball should be coming out of the tip of his fingers right when that stripe is pointing at the quarterback.
Wow.
And I use that as a measure, and in watching him, I thought he did a really good job naturally of those type of throws with anticipation, which means, okay, I'm going to transition into being a good college quarterback. And then every level, the transition, it doesn't always go to people talk about arm strength. I hear that all the time. Well, let me tell you about Peyton. Peyton was here when, he suffered the surgery, the loss of strength, and he lived with us here while he was on his way back. And then he had the greatest year in the history of an NFL quarterback with the Broncos, and he couldn't throw it near as hard as he used to, and nearly, with the depth and the distance that he used to, and yet he threw for more yards and touchdowns than ever seen in a regular season because of what I just said. What we focused on with him here was even better anticipation. And so I think Trevor has that innate ability, but it also goes with him being a good receiver coach. You want to talk about, and I mean, that's what I tell them. You're the guy. Ultimately, they're going to do what you ask them and tell them to do. You're a professional. So take over, really step up. And he's going to be coachable and be coached. I'm not saying that's not the case, but you understand what I'm saying.
Dave, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. You asked the question, it's a lot of words, but
it's brilliant.
Not do that. You know what I'm saying?
That's great. Great insight.
Yeah, believe me, your words are better than our words, David. All right, so listen, it's a great segue. What you were saying. My next question is, you've told me over and over that the most important thing about a quarterback on the field is between his ears, not his arm. And you were just talking about it. So if you had a laundry list of what makes a great quarterback in your mind, where would it begin and what would it include?
I go back to why do you have anticipation? You train a quarterback from the neck up and the neck down. And they're both equally important. And the reason they're both equally important, but it always starts with the neck up. So like when I went back to Tennessee for those 2 years and inherited Eric Ainge, the thing that I did, and it really kind of confused him and his other quarterback friends and teammates that were there, we didn't talk about the pass game, not a pass route, nothing. We spent 2 weeks of doing nothing but teaching defense. Absolute, complete understanding. That's what I meant about padding plays.
Right.
I had them pad 3 games to where, when I say pad, we have a pad that has the picture of a field, and you put all of these people exactly where they are on the field, and then write down what occurred, what was the coverage, what was the front, what was the pressure. And it's tedious, but you start gaining that edge of anticipation. And so why I say it's between the ears, so this is where it all comes together. Pre-snap read, post-snap read, alarm. That's how fast it happens. And people that don't understand that, I make a pre-snap read that helps me with the amount of time. Once that ball is snapped, you get a little reminder if you were right. There's a post-snap read, and the alarm is going off in 3 seconds or less. It means the ball out. The decision's made. The anticipation comes. And I'm an impatient person when it comes to that, and some quarterbacks can think that quickly or not. And then the neck down is that everything they do fundamentally, when you build it from the ground up, the footwork, the shoulders, the grip of the ball, the carriage of the ball, has to be mindless because your mind is working so hard and so fast. If you're thinking about your mechanics to make them good, you can't play football. And if you're not thinking about your mechanics and they're lost, you can't play football. So it's a fun thing to build a quarterback, and when not everybody can do it. And when you realize, like people ask me, when did I know Peyton or Eli or Daniel, any of these guys were special, is when you're at practice and there's a play and you're asking them about what went through your mind. And it's maybe a 5-second play, and it takes them 45 seconds to tell you everything they thought.
That's beautiful.
Well, it's real, you know?
Yeah.
And so their computer works different than mine, thank goodness, you know?
So let me take you real quick then to the first time you saw Trevor. The first time you saw him, he was pretty much, it was November of his freshman season, so it looked like he was at the point where it was all starting to come together for him. Could you see that? Could you see that in him then?
Yes. I mean, I left there and told our coaches, I said, wow, you know, there's more there than even meets the eye. And, of course, he looks like Thor or something, you know. I mean, he looks like some, you know, I mean, holy smoke. And from what I know, talking with his high school coach and people, I know people in the area, just a tremendous person. And you can't ever undervalue that. When we start undervaluing that, we run into trouble in any organization, you know. And so I think that's also a big plus on his side. I don't know him, but again, I know people that know him well. I knew his high school coach. They just can absolutely not say enough great things about him as a person.
David, what's your gut feeling on how good Trevor can be in the NFL?
Well, you know, I think he can be. You're asking, can he? I think he'd be great. I think he'd be a great player. I do. The thing that has to happen that is always a little bit sometimes a roll of the dice is the system has to fit the guy and the people around him. It has to jive, and the teammates, you know, and you got a great coach, you know, without a question, that knows how to build an organization and get it aligned. But there's so many X factors surrounding any player. And, you know, we just have seen what Tom Brady has done with the Bucs, which is a tribute to Tom Brady, but it's also a tribute to his preparation with the Patriots. It's also a tribute to Bruce and Clyde Christensen, who are good friends, that let him be Tom. You know what I'm saying? Do what Tom does well. You know, Clyde, and thank goodness Clyde and Bruce aren't the ones playing, you know, it's Tom Brady, you know. And so you know, I want people to understand it's not as easy a fix as you think and just draft a guy and go play. And it's a wonderful, complex thing. And, you know, and I talk to Peyton an awful lot. We talk about, you know, the journey. I started coaching him in 1994, and then he played in the league 18 years, and we still talk football. And it's just an ongoing thing, too. I hope any young player realizes that, you know, the growth potential is phenomenal. And go into that thing believing that, you know, you either get better or you get worse. You know, what's the old saying? If you're green, you're growing. If you're ripe, you're rotting.
Right.
You know, and I think, and that's another thing. I don't know him. I don't know that about him, but it certainly seemed to be that they were hungry at Clemson, and he was committed to his teammates to try to continue to win a national championship. So that's a good indicator, right?
Absolutely. David, you made a great point about environment that these players are thrown into once they're drafted. If Urban Meyer reached out to you, what would be your advice on how to handle Trevor and getting him acclimated to the NFL level and in terms of system? Well,
because I know Urban, you know, so well, it is a reminder, just be yourself. There's no bigger fool on earth than one that thinks they can fool a young person. You know, you got to care about them. I don't care if they're professional athletes or not. We're all human. And every professional athlete wants to be cared about as well. And I think that's a reminder that people, myself included, I'm going through that right now. I'm reinvesting in my relationships. We can all get too busy in football and too in love with just winning. And it's got to be an element of relationships at any level. And the great ones, I mean, I used to go, I tell our young coaches all the time, when I was a young single coach, we didn't get people's film. I mean, this is real film. They didn't share out 16 millimeter film. So you had to go there and watch the film at their place. But I watched legendary coaches coach. I was blown away by what made Bill Walsh and a special coach. And the opportunity to see Parcells at his height, I thought was, you know, did a great job. Coach Bryant, in my case. But those people cared about the relationships. They were genuine. And I see sometimes in pro football that it can go from owner to owner, GM to GM, and coach to coach. And will somebody tell me where the relationships matter?
Right.
And so, that's just my take. That may be old-fashioned. I don't know. People may be listening and saying, what a joke, and that's okay if they do. It's what I believe. So, that's how I feel.
All right, we're wrapping it up with David Cutcliffe, head coach at Duke University. David, real quick, with Peyton and Eli, and even with Daniel to an extent, because Daniel was going to a huge media market in New York, were any of those three, did they ever have any hesitation about being the face of a franchise? And did you guys ever talk about, look, it's going to be different in this situation?
Oh, yeah. New York, particularly, because, and Eli was built for it. Think about what Eli did. Eli went to Ole Miss where the speed limit on campus was his dad's jersey number,
right.
Okay? And he followed his brother in the SEC, who was the SEC Player of the Year, first-team All-American. So Eli has always managed to be true to Eli. And I told Daniel, New York is New York. And so if you start listening to everything, good or bad, you're wrong. Be true to yourself and, measure yourself by your work ethic and by really knowing there's a difference between success and achievement is what I've told all of them. Achievement is looking yourself in the mirror and know that I have done everything in my power, not kid yourself, to be the very best I can be. Success or awards or someone else's opinion. And I truly think achievement is a lot more rewarding than success. But again, you need those reminders. And there's times when they're in those tough markets, you got to remind them, And I'll tell you this quick story about Daniel Jones, and this is why he's going to be successful. So the night they beat the Cowboys, and so they're counting on the Eagles to hopefully win and beat the Washington football team. And so we're texting, and I'm saying go Eagles, and no offense to Ron Rivera and them, it's
right.
Daniel Jones, okay? And they don't win. I stay up, watch. I knew he would. So the next morning, I'm up, start my workout, and I get a text from Daniel at 5:30, and he says, well, they fell short and da-da-da-da-da. And so I immediately, what are you doing? Well, he was in the complex watching their game, trying to get better. No, they don't have another game now.
Right.
But he's by himself in the complex watching the film of the day before.
Yeah,
so that's understanding what achievement is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the between the ears stuff you talked about. David, thank you so much for your insights and being so generous with your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Guys, have a great one.
Thanks, David.
All righty, bye-bye.
What a fantastic interview with David Cutcliffe. Again, we want to thank Claude Nolan Cadillac for sponsoring the TrevorCast and bringing you this unique content. And many thanks again to David Cutcliffe, one of the best gentlemen in all of sports. Hayes, I thought the interesting thing when Cut was talking about Peyton and Eli is when it came to the on-field stuff, it seemed like he was veering more toward Peyton. And I don't know if you want to make that as a comparison, but it certainly seemed that way.
I thought so too. I mean, I thought it was really striking that was sort of where his mind would go, is where Peyton was in college at Tennessee. And again, the fact that I think he sees things in Trevor from a work ethic standpoint. The thing that I took away is how Peyton Manning still had a yearning to learn about football, even in year 18. And that's going to be the separator here for Trevor Lawrence. Is he going to be good or is he going to be legendary? Well, if he's going to be legendary, then you've got to have that thirst for the game. And it looks like Trevor Lawrence has that. But it was great to hear David's perspective on the whole thing, and just, again, the athleticism. It's almost like Peyton Manning, but the guy runs a 4.6.
I can tell you this. This is one thing that Dabo told me. Dabo Swinney, Clemson coach, told me. This is probably 2 years ago. He said the thing with Trevor is he doesn't look like the kind of guy. He's very low key. He doesn't look like the kind of guy that's going to be like aggressive in your face. But he will with other players. He will motivate them. And he said, number two, he doesn't want to be good. He wants to be great. And I love when he said that to me, I was like, I love that. I love hearing that. Because a lot of guys, at that level, at the college level, are kind of afraid of great or don't want to work hard enough to be great. And if you're at that level in college and you're shying away from it now, what happens when you get to the NFL? And we've seen it recently with Isaiah Wilson, the tackle with the Titans. A first-round pick, and it looks like he's off that team after a year. So I think you've got to understand who you're getting, what you're getting mentally and physically. And it's interesting to me that we talk about physical attributes. The one thing that always struck me, and I think clearly it struck David Cutcliffe as well, is he's a big dude, man. Trevor is a big dude. He's not a 240, 250-pound kid. He's more sinewy. He's probably 220. Probably get up to like 225, but he's every bit of 6'5", every bit. And he's like one of those long basketball players. When you watch basketball players, you always think, oh, that guy's got length. That's what he's like when I see him. Yeah,
and again, to hear David talk about the proportionate size of Trevor Lawrence and his lower body and how much torque he generates in the lower body in his arm strength and how important that is. I mean, it's just, again, there's a reason why we're doing this. It's because he's the total package. I mean, it's going to be. We will try to find people to come on here and bring us a dose of reality and perspective here. But I think it's going to be difficult because that's what everybody seems. We weren't the first ones on this train. I mean, to your point, the scouts have known about him, before he even got to Clemson, and then certainly I was woken up. His national title game his freshman year. I mean, to dissect a Nick Saban defense as a true freshman like he did that night, it was clear he was special, and all he's done is get better since. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait, and it's been a great first episode. I'm looking forward to 9 more with you.
Yeah, it's fun, and I also think it's going to be fun to see how he assimilates himself into the locker room at Jacksonville, and David talked about that as well, the environment and what it's going to be like when he gets there. How important will it be, you think? And you've covered this team now for 3 years or longer than that. How long have you covered this team?
I started in 2013.
2013, okay, so since I've been here for 3 years. But you've covered since 2013. You've seen this locker room go from bad to worse. And whether he likes it or not, the quarterback is the centerpiece of the locker room. He's going to have to go in there, and he's going to have to rally that locker room, right?
No question about it. And again, I think he's somebody that is wired right to do it because he's going to let his work speak for itself. And again, his talent, I think, is going to overwhelm what his teammates are used to. I mean, again, these guys are used to catching passes from Gardner Minshew and Jake Luton and Mike Glennon and Nick Foles and Blake Bortles. And I mean, they're not in the same stratosphere as Trevor Lawrence. They're just not.
Right.
They're just not. And so I think his receivers, his tight ends, his backs, they're going to gravitate towards him immediately because of his talent. I think the linemen and the defense are going to gravitate towards Trevor because of how grounded he is and because of his work ethic.
All right, that wraps up episode 1 of the TrevorCast, brought to you by Claude Nolan Cadillac. There'll be 9 more all the way up to the Thursday of draft day, April 29th. Be sure to tune in next week for episode 2.